Hi, and welcome to PowerViews. I'm Dan McDade, your host and president of PointClear. My guest today is Ruth Stevens. Ruth consults on customer acquisition and retention and is a guest blogger at hbr.org and Biznology. She is past chair of the DMA Business to Business Council and past president of the Direct Marketing Club of New York. Crain's B2B magazine named Ruth one of the 100 most influential people in business marketing. She is the author of Maximizing Lead Generation, the complete guide for B2B marketers, and Trade Show and Event Marketing. She has held senior marketing positions at Time Warner, Ziff Davis, and IBM, and holds an MBA from Columbia University. Ruth, welcome to PowerViews.
So glad to be here, Dan. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, it's good to see you, and I know you had a snowstorm last night, right? So did you have to put on your boots when you got in here today?
Yes, but today is clear, albeit cold, and just glorious. So.
Well, good. Well, it was 19 when I arrived at work today here in Atlanta, Georgia, so that's pretty cold for Atlanta.
Don't worry about the orange crop in Florida.
That's right. That's right. You and my friend Bernice Grossman have published a new study on B2B Database Marketing. Can you talk a little bit about what that's about?
Yes, it's just out in the last couple of months, and our objective with this was to analyze the depth of data available to B2B marketers for prospecting purposes. And just to mention, in the past, we've studied the breadth and the accuracy of prospecting data that's available to B2B marketers. And this year, we thought, well, let's dig in a little deeper so that we can share with our readers exactly what kind of data is available in terms of the richness about any given account. And frankly, we were really surprised at the richness. Some of the vendors, there were 7 who participated, showed as many as thousands of records about each account. Those were mostly the tech data vendors. But the amount of data that we marketers can get from these vendors is remarkable these days and can be put to a lot of good uses.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, and this is a little bit of a tough question probably, do you think there are some vendors that will participate and other vendors won't participate? Do you think that the confidence to participate in this evaluation, indicates that they're going to have better data, or do you think it's just other reasons?
I have no idea.
I love the honest answer.
Truthfully, there are lots of vendors out there, of course, and we invited 14 to participate, and 7 participated. Now, we know that some of them have explained that they're unwilling to participate because they feel that they don't own the data. This is in situations where they're basically brokerage companies, risk management companies who have compiled large databases by deduping their clients' data, and that's completely understandable.
Sure.
Sometimes it's an internal decision, really, but it's hard to know.
Okay.
But we're sure grateful to the ones who did, because they really, I guess the expression is they opened the kimono and really let us have a look at what they have on offer. We even submitted the names of 5 well-known companies and asked them to share the entire record that they have on those companies. These were companies like Federated Department Stores and Dell, and this means that our readers can compare the sample record from 7 different vendors, which is pretty great.
Well, my operations team and me as well are avid readers, so we look forward to that coming out every year. In addition to the richness of the data, were there other insights that the research provided to you?
Yes. Well, let me just mention that in the past we had a bias toward trying to get at completeness and accuracy, because those are 2 of the criteria that we marketers are basing our purchase decisions on. And we thought that this time, given the depth of data that we expected to get, we were going to have trouble going after accuracy and completeness. And it's sort of a different animal this time. But at the same time, we thought that there were additional questions that we could ask this time that would make it even more interesting. And so one of the questions that we asked was for the vendors to share with us the elements that they find, or more accurately probably their clients find, to be predictive of the target audience that they're going after, that would help them select basically better. And of course, the reason for having great richness is that it allows you to select on variables that you might not have had access to before. But the thing that was pretty exciting about this is that several of the vendors shared really unusual elements that reflected predictability of success in their campaigns. And the reason that we asked that question was, this is a bit of an old chestnut in the B2B world. Do you remember when data was originally compiled out of the yellow pages?
Of course, yeah. Or I even remember when data was compiled by R.L. Polk by going door to door. So.
Yeah. Well, things have come a long way.
Yeah.
But apparently, and I hope this is true because it makes such a great story, in the day when the yellow pages were the primary source of business-to-business data for prospecting, and once it was automated, then the fields would all be shipped over to the compiler for compilation in a database. And one of the fields that came along with the elements like the company name, the postal address, and the phone number was the size of the Yellow Pages ad that the company may have placed. And it turned out, even though that the size of the ad wouldn't have, that was really more of an operational category than something that a marketer would request. It turned out actually to be predictive. And the theory is that, if they're placing a large Yellow Pages ad, maybe they have more budget and are, more active and a better prospect. So that story suggesting to us that there may be surprising elements that actually turn out to be predictive gave us the idea of asking that question. So just to share with you, I brought some notes about some of the fields that we would not necessarily have thought of as being predictive. One is that OneSource, one of the 7 vendors who participated, disclosed that they have a venture capital trigger data point, which suggests that that particular firm has recently received some funding and therefore, might be in a position to do more buying than usual. Another that came from Hart Hanks is check purchase likelihood, which is an internally built model that Hart Hanks develops that suggests that this particular firm is in the market for tech products. And OneSource also had a so-called prospectability score, which I really liked. They being, that company tends to be more of a pre-sales preparation type of data set. So the fact that they offer a prospectability score isn't really surprising, but apparently you can tell them a lot of information about your sales strategies, like what's the territory you're going after, and what kinds of titles you're seeking, and they will suggest that one account versus another is a better prospect for you based on your sales objectives and sales strategies. So that's
interesting.
Pretty exciting. And then I was also, frankly, happy to see that Dun & Bradstreet's old Prism-like cluster system that they've had in place for literally decades and haven't really been able to, I think, take it to market in a really effective way. It's been either licensed or otherwise being used by Salesforce.com, the owners of the former Jigsaw.
Mm-hmm.
And they're offering these cluster codes that allow you to append a certain, business type code to your database and get some insights into what kind of buying is going on there as a result of that. So there's a lot more out there than meets the eye, and it's way beyond what we usually think of as B2B prospecting data, namely company name, address, couple of titles, and the employee size and the industry code, which is
right.
what most of us think of as B2B prospecting data.
Right. Yeah, this is really an aside, and you probably you're the list business better than I do, but I believe it was Walter Carl years ago, who I think sometimes has been credited as the grandfather of list management and list rental business. It's management and brokerage, sorry. And he told a story of when he was a young man standing on a street corner, and cars would come by and they would say, "Hey, where's so-and-so's address? There's a poker game there tonight." And he would tell them how to get there, and they'd give him $1. And next car would come by, same thing would happen. He would get $1. And he said that he finally decided that it had to be a good business where he could sell the same address 10 times and make $10. So I thought that was a great story.
It is a great story.
Tells you, of course, how long I've been in the business.
Never mind.
You and Bernice have published a series of white papers and research reports, and they really cover everything from, I wrote it down here, customer acquisition, retention, loyalty, data cleansing, and enhancement, list strategies, and more. Can you talk a little bit about what prompted you guys to collaborate on these topics and to write these white papers?
Thank you. Well, Bernice and I are always getting together over breakfast and yammering about the business and what our clients are concerned about. And around 2004, we came up with the idea of investigating some of these difficult issues that we know are challenging to B2B marketers and seeing whether we could shed some light on them. In the early days of our research, we actually got a bunch of people together in a room. It was at a DMA, I think probably in 2004 or 2005. And we said, okay, everybody, what are the big data-related problems that you are facing? And then we put together little teams and asked people to come up with strategies and ideas and share ideas, and we compiled that into a white paper so that there would be a record of it, and it would help others beyond just who was in the room. And then after that, we kept coming up with fresh ideas. People would send us ideas. In fact, this deep dive idea that we worked on this year came from a friend in the industry, and we're very grateful. So we then sort of veered off after doing a study on what B2B marketers are actually doing with their databases. So this was a kind of a list of the applications and the percentages of use of those applications, and also a study on how to develop a request for information if you're thinking about outsourcing your database to a third party for management. And we also did an analysis of the availability of data append as an enhancement to your house file. But then we veered into this matter of asking vendors to help us by sharing information about what they had on offer. And that we've been doing for about 6 years now. Originally we started with compiled data because, that's where there's a lot available. Then we looked at response databases, which was sort of fun, and that's where we ran into the problem of people being hesitant to participate because they didn't own the data or they didn't the way they viewed it. And so then we also published one on the tech vertical, and we considered maybe in the future adding additional verticals. But of course, in B2B, technology is one of the most active industry categories, so that was a natural first step. And we have actually 4 ideas for future white papers, and now we're trying to decide which one to do next.
Well, let me know. Maybe we can collaborate on something and help you with that.
That would be such fun.
How does our viewers get a hold of some of these white papers? I know I can just go to your site or I can talk to you, but how do other people you get a hold of this information?
Yes, they're all available at ruthstevens.com and also at Bernice's website, which is gmrsgroup.com. And I think she has them on her homepage. Myself, I have them in a section called White Papers.
Okay, great.
They're easily downloadable.
I highly recommend it. And before we shift gears here, I want to talk a little bit about an article you wrote in November of this last year. B2B prospecting data just keeps getting better. And I think this was on your blog, right? Do I have that right, or was this published elsewhere?
Yes, it was published at Biznology, the digital marketing blog, where I'm a guest blogger.
Okay, my printer sometimes cuts stuff off like that. So the quote that I wanted to read to our audience was, the most reliable and scalable approach to finding new B2B customers is outbound communications, whether one is using mail, phone, or email, or using rented lists or purchase lists that the B2B marketers typically use to select audiences. And I thought it was interesting. There was an article, or a blog posted just yesterday, that kind of says to me that the tide is shifting a little bit now. That folks are beginning to recognize that emailing them and they will come, or the so-called inbound marketing craze is not necessarily the holy grail that everybody thought it was, and that sometimes you have to pick up the phone and make a call in order to reach out and qualify a prospect. I just wondered, before we switched gears and talked a little bit about your books, if you wanted to comment just a little bit about that.
Absolutely. It's a controversial subject, the same way social media is a controversial subject. And to me, the role of a marketer in most B2B environments is to help the sales team find productivity and be more efficient. And providing sales leads is really the best way. Well, it's one of several, but probably the most important way that we can help our sales counterparts gain leverage and use their time better. And in order to do that, we need to be conducting, and they're all about meeting their quotas. And quotas generate revenue goals for the firms and shareholders. So we need a predictable, reliable method. And the thing that worries me about inbound marketing and social media as well is that they're hard to scale, number one, and they're hard to rely on when you need to deliver a certain amount of revenue in the period. So we need scalable, reliable, predictable media channels. And then the social media and inbound marketing of the world can be like the frosting on the cake. But the cake has to be through media channels that we can pretty much, through testing and experience, rely on to provide our salespeople with the leads they need. So that's why I tend to focus on these standby channels. Email can be one of them. It's really tough using email as an entirely cold prospecting channel because, business people, like consumers, hate spam, and if they've never heard of us, they're very likely to delete. So direct mail and phone are still some of the most powerful workhorse media for lead generation, for totally cold prospecting. Once we already have the beginnings of a relationship with someone and we're talking about deepening and nurturing that relationship, then email is unparalleled. So I'm not going to complain about it there.
Well, you and I probably share this, that, most of the clients that we work with, they can't really afford to wait for business to come to them because not enough of it comes to them. And if they wait for business to come to them, the chances are they're going to lose business to someone else. So, that's I think the reason why people still say people buy from people as opposed to buying from companies or buying from, a black box, if you will.
I was at the kickoff luncheon of the Direct Marketing Club of New York quite recently. It's just a week ago. And I was talking to the head of an envelope manufacturing company. And he, believe it or not, Dan, he still walks into buildings and cold calls on companies.
I'll be darned.
And he finds it very productive. And now, in a city like New York, where if you pick the right building, you can find 100 companies that may need envelopes. So it's not as crazy and untargeted as it sounds. But I think it supports your point that if we're not out selling through whatever channels, we're not going to get the business that we deserve.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about your books. I mentioned a couple of books here that were Maximizing Lead Generation, The Complete Guide for B2B Marketers, and then Trade Show and Event Marketing.
And I took the liberty of actually pulling a copy to show to your lovely audience. This one is Maximizing Lead Generation, which you just mentioned, and it is a soup to nuts review of the process of lead generation, from inquiry generation through qualification, nurturing, handoff to sale, and measuring the results. So I was very happy when Pearson asked me to produce this, because I think everyone needs to remind himself or herself that it's such a process-oriented business that we're in. I think you're a believer in this view, Dan, that the new shiny object that we all get excited about is great. Let's go try it. But if we're not focused on the blocking and tackling of everyday management of the process, which is really more of a science than it is an art, we're not going to be doing our jobs as fiduciary deliverers of value to shareholders. Now, the other one that I wrote a few years back, Trade Show and Event Marketing, this one has turned out to be sort of an interesting story. The reason that I decided to write this book is that I noticed that the largest line item on any given B2B budget tends to be trade shows and events. And when I would ask business marketers, so how are you doing with trade shows? And what kind of value are you getting from business events? They would say the darndest things. I don't know if you have this experience. They would say things like, yes, well, we love that event. We've got to be there. Our competitors are there. It's our industry conference. We've got to be there. They would say things like, the booth was really buzzy. There was a lot going on, really exciting. But I never heard things like, yes, we had an ROI of 35%, or we generated 400 qualified leads, or we added this much to our database, or we had 50% current customer meetings and 50% prospecting meetings, or any of the other tangible results statements that I would have expected. So I took it on myself to go share some thoughts about how to turn trade show and business event marketing into a more scientific, step-by-step, process-oriented piece of the marketing mix, and try to improve the results that marketers are getting for this, gigantic. I saw shares of marketing budgets as high as 60%. The average was somewhere around 18 to 24% of a B2B marketing budget is spent on this stuff. It's billions of dollars.
And what I found is that it seems like the bigger the company, the larger the waste. I don't know if that's been yours, because the decision making gets pushed down. In fact, I was having a conversation, I'll keep this short, but I was having a conversation a couple weeks ago, and it was 4 relatively young marketing executives, and you could tell in the conversations with them, first of all, they had no idea what I was talking about, and I was using simple words like lead generation, lead qualification, lead nurturing, and you could tell that their entire orientation was all marketing automation. They didn't know anything about marketing other than marketing automation. And yet they were making decisions, that were probably in the millions of dollars for this company based on a very, very limited knowledge set. So it's frustrating to me. I sometimes want to contact the president of companies and say, do you realize what's really going on? And and I've even written white papers about this, so that it's kind of like my soapbox is don't quit wasting these millions of dollars and figure out how to do this better. So I'm totally behind both of your books, and I think you and I are very much aligned as far as our content is concerned.
Preach it, Dan.
What's that? Preach it. Yeah.
Preach it.
I'll get off my soapbox now. I know that you teach at the graduate level at Columbia University, and I was just wondering kind of what's going on in academia as you compare that to, the business world. What do you see as, maybe some of the future, because a lot of these folks are graduating and getting into the business world, and they're obviously going to have an impact.
Well, fortunately, at the graduate level, many MBA students have figured out that business to business may be the career area that they go into. And so that's a break. But frankly, B2B marketing is still not widely taught in colleges and graduate schools, despite the fact that many of the grads are going to end up in this field, which is too bad. But there's some hope, because there are certain universities that are focusing on B2B. Like, oddly, you might be surprised that Penn State is a school where there's an Institute of Business Markets, Institute for the Study of Business Markets, that's headed by a PhD professor named Ralph Oliva. You might want to invite him to your program, because he actually started in business. He was in sales and marketing like us, and decided to go into academia, so he sort of gets it. And there are also some purely academic professors who write a terrific textbook on the subject of business marketing. Two professors called Hutt and Steh, S-T-E-H. And they're very good, and those textbooks are great for use at both the undergrad and the graduate level. So there's some progress.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear it. So let's move on to everybody's probably least favorite question. Tell me what your predictions are for 2014 in B2B marketing. What can we expect to see that's different?
Different, I don't know, but I would say there's going to be more of video in B2B and more of mobile. And in fact, I was thrilled that just yesterday a study was published by eMarketer quoting an Ad Age study, now that Ad Age is running Crane's, the old Crane's B2B.
Right.
The study suggested that in 2013 versus 2012, the biggest changes in investment, the biggest increases in investment are mobile and video. So I thought, that's what I'm seeing as well. I'm glad to hear numbers supporting that. I am personally really excited about video for B2B. I have a current client who was poo-pooing it, saying, that's just too cheesy, or, it's not professional enough. And I said, au contraire, there are so many really solid applications for video in B2B. Hey, look again what we're doing here today. But also, some of the applications that I really like are getting a technically proficient employee to demonstrate a product or to discuss some of the finer points of the technology that's being introduced. Another idea is to have a kind of Barbara Walters style interview with a senior executive about future trends, or where the industry is going, or some of the problems that the clients are trying to solve, or other sort of thought leadership type questions. And another is to just have video bios at the executive section at the company website where, Dan, you have such a wonderful personality and ability to engage. If an executive like you just did a self-introduction into a flip camera, people these days don't really need the production values that they used to demand for corporate videos in the day. Now it can just be pretty simple, informal, and people find it irresistible. So I'm expecting that to catch on much more. Then, of course, mobile. Oh man, we all need to be mobile enabling our websites. But not only that, it's pretty clear that our response devices need to be mobile enabled as well, and that requires some expense. But it's essential, as more than 50% of emails are being viewed on tablets and smartphones today, and we can't escape it anymore.
I was driving today from South Carolina to Georgia to my office here. Now we just moved to Johns Creek, north of Atlanta, and I was looking at all the telephone poles going by, and I thought, I wonder how many years it's going to be before basically telephone poles are obsolete, because we all know that there's so few people using their landline now. The only reason I have one is the only connectivity I can get is DSL, so right. I have to have a home phone.
Yeah.
But
and
it is
third world countries. The whole landline infrastructure has been left over, and they use nothing but cellular.
Right, and there are even these little businesses with people setting up to charge other people's cell phone and make a living doing that, which I always think is fascinating. Well, let me ask you again, what are some ways to get a hold of you if our audience wants to learn more about what you do?
Sure, thank you. Well, my website is ruthstevens.com, and I'm available by email, of course, ruth@ruthstevens.com. And I should also mention that not only are there about 15 white papers there's also a compendium of several hundred articles I've written on B2B marketing over the years in various marketing publications that are there for the taking. So I encourage people to go peruse, and thanks for the opportunity, Dan.
All right, well, thank you. I read everything you put out, at least I think I do. So I appreciate it, and thanks so much for taking time. Well, for now, this is Dan McDade signing off on another edition of PowerViews. Thank you for watching.